Chapter 4. The Wayne Enterprises complex towered above most of the other buildings in the luminous Gotham skyline. The enormous glass palace was the city's newest skyscraper. Bruce Wayne had spared no expense in the construction of the symbol of his international corporation. A multi-level terrace, completely enclosed in glass, made up the top few floors of the building. During the day, visitors to the terrace walked among the clouds. At night, it seemed as if they could reach up and touch the stars. Terry McGinnis stepped from the elevator and strolled into the crowd that had gathered on the terrace. The formal reception to celebrate Bruce Wayne's return to the top spot in his company was underway. Bruce was used to fancy, formal affairs like this one. He had been attending them for most of his adult life, either as a guest or as the host. For Terry, this was a whole new experience. Not used to wearing a tuxedo, he fiddled with his collar. Two attractive young women pointed in Terry's direction. He flashed his biggest smile. Maybe this won't be so bad after all, he thought. Then he heard them whispering and giggling. That's when Terry saw Bruce enter the room behind him and realized they're talking about Bruce. Bruce greeted them and approached Terry. Gotta be the money, Terry thought. Bruce was smiling and nodding to several other party guests. A woman in her mid-30s wearing a business suit approached them.
Good evening, Mr. Wayne,
she said. Bruce nodded.
Mrs. Carr, you remember my assistant, Terry McGinnis?
Of course. I'm glad you could join us, Terry.
Ms. Carr replied, smiling.
Everyone is here. Well, everyone except Mr. Price, unfortunately.
That's no surprise,
Bruce said to Terry with a wink. Ms. Carr had made all the arrangements for the evening's affair. She now stepped up to a podium in the center of a long dais, where Bruce and the other dignitaries would be seated for dinner.
May I have your attention, please? She said
into the microphone. The crowd grew silent.
It's my pleasure to welcome back the guiding light of this company, Bruce Wayne.
The terrace erupted into thunderous applause as Bruce moved to the podium. He began.
It's a pleasure to see you all again. In the future, I hope to...
Static crackled. Then a piercing whine interrupted Bruce, screeching through the public address system. Bruce waited for it to fade away, then continued.
Spend time getting to know each member of our company, learning about you individually.
The feedback came again, this time louder and lasting longer. The guests grabbed their ears. Bruce stepped back from the microphone as the screech changed into a sinister electronic laugh. That's when the Jokers struck. The DDs burst from their hiding places on either side of the room, tumbling toward the podium. Wolf charged from the back of the terrace, growling savagely and rushing right for Bruce. The crowd scattered in fear as Ms. Carr quickly called security on her cell phone.
Security! Emergency on terrace level.
In the building's nearby security station, a team of uniformed guards leapt to their feet and rushed to the door. The security station's door slid open automatically. The guards skidded to a halt. Standing in the doorway were two clowns wearing gas masks. One was short and squat, the other tall and wearing a floppy hat. The first one tossed several gas grenades into the room. Within seconds, the security station was filled with thick, noxious smoke.
Hey, look out!
The guards fell to the floor, unconscious. Back on the terrace, Wolf launched himself onto the dais, landing inches from Bruce Wayne's face. The beast snarled and growled, hoping to frighten the guest of honor. But Bruce held his ground. To him, this was just another punk. Hairy, with big teeth and sharp claws, but a punk nonetheless. With a quickness that startled the beast, Bruce slammed Wolf with his cane, knocking the mutant to the floor. Terry ran up to his mentor.
You gonna be okay?
Bruce nodded.
Go to work,
he said, flatly. Terry dashed away as the DDs tumbled up to Bruce. Each girl grabbed one of his arms.
Well, if it isn't old Mr. Wayne,
DD cooed. Bruce swung his cane in a wide arc, trying to reach both girls with one swift stroke, but they easily ducked out of the way. Then they struck as one, kicking Bruce in the midsection.
so debonair, so dapper, so decrepit,
the other DD added. He tumbled to the floor, gasping for breath. The terrace began to shake. Water glasses on the dais tumbled over, mirrors on the wall cracked, and panic overtook the guests. A deep rumble filled the room. followed by thick smoke and flashing laser lights. Then a trap door in the dais silently slid open. A white-faced figure with green hair sprang into the room, laughing maniacally.
Hello, Gotham! Joker's back in town!
He shouted. Bruce caught his breath and scrambled to his feet, staring at the figure before him in disbelief.
Can't be.
He muttered, the color draining from his face. His mind raced for a rational explanation, but found none. The Joker turned to face Bruce, his familiar grin spread wide across his face.
Oh no, your old eyes do not deceive you, Brucey. After all, who know me better than you?
He clearly was enjoying this. As the Joker reached out a gloved hand to grab Bruce, Batman swooped down and tackled the crazed clown, slamming him to the floor.
Back off, gruesome.
Batman barked, rolling to his feet.
Ah, the new boy.
The Joker replied, looking Batman up and down.
Ears are too long and I missed the cape, but not too shabby. Not too shabby at all.
The Joker bounded to his feet and called out for Woof.
Woof!
The fur-covered mutant vaulted to his boss's side. Wolf launched himself onto Batman, teeth bared, claws slashing. As the future knight grabbed the freakish creature by the head, the two wrestled onto the floor. The Joker turned away from the battle and spoke softly into the handheld communications device. In a research lab many stories below the elegant terrace, Chucko and Ghoul were hard at work. Operating a hover lift, they grabbed a huge tracking control console, similar to the one they had tried to steal a few days earlier.
How's it coming, boys?
We're home free.
Chucko announced into his wrist communicator, at the same time swiftly maneuvering the console away from its housing.
Then I'll see you there.
The Joker's voice replied through the communicator's tiny speaker. Ghoul gripped the back of Chucko's seat as the hoverlift smashed through the door of the lab, the stolen console firmly in its powerful mechanical grasp. Back on the terrace, Wolf swiped at Batman with his front claws, pinning the future knight to the floor. The young hero flipped the snarling beast off with a powerful kick, then scrambled to his feet just as Wolf leapt at him once more. With a crash, the two tumbled to the floor in front of the dais. The Joker snapped his fingers.
Time to go, Dee Dee,
he announced, and the two sisters bounded to his side. Then the Joker pressed a button on a small remote. Within seconds, a purple hover car with a giant clown face painted on the back floated up to the terrace. The Joker gave a short whistle, and Wolf instantly broke off his attack. The creature dashed for the car, followed by Dee Dee, and finally, the Joker. Batman's boot jets flared on, and he took to the air, closing in on the fleeing gang. The Joker reached the hover car first. As the others scrambled in, he pressed another button on his remote. A powerful explosion rocked the terrace, then another and another. Hidden explosive devices tore through the bar, the food table, the podium, as the terrified guests raced for cover. Batman glanced over his shoulder at the chaos and destruction behind him. Then he turned back to the Joker, who revved the engine on his hovering car.
Well, what's it gonna be, that fake?
The Joker called out. He could go after the Jokers or stay and save the innocent victims. Batman knew he had no choice. Grimacing, he turned and fired his boot jets, streaking back to the screaming crowd. Just then, a deafening blast tore a large section of railing off the edge of the terrace, pulling two horrified guests along with it. They plunged, screaming, down the side of the immense glass tower. Batman dove straight down after them, his boot jets lighting up the night sky. Before they had fallen 10 stories, the future knight grabbed the petrified couple and flew them back up to the terrace. The explosions had stopped. Bruce Wayne made it over to Batman, who scanned the night sky for a sign of the Jokers. But the hover car was gone, and only the thick smoke of the devastated terrace remained. Chapter 5. The ride back to Wayne Manor was fraught with silent tension. To Terry, it felt as if it would last forever. When he couldn't stand Bruce's stony silence any longer, Terry finally spoke up.
I know what you're thinking.
The young man said uncomfortably.
I messed up. I let the clown go in order to save those people.
You did the right thing.
Bruce replied firmly, his face a grim mask.
So, the Joker, huh?
Terry asked, glancing at his mentor. Bruce remained silent.
Looks pretty spry for a guy who's got to be, what, mid-80s?
Terry continued. Bruce stared out the window.
Any theories on that? Clone? Robot? Suspended animation due to floating around frozen in a block of ice?
Shut up and drive.
Bruce replied, with his eyes firmly fixed on the road ahead. Terry looked at his mentor in surprise, then shrugged and turned back to his driving.
Yes, sir.
He said softly. In a suburban neighborhood just outside Gotham City, a heavy-set middle-aged man around his 50s sat on his couch. His feet rested on the coffee table as he watched the evening news. His house looked like many others on the street. Old but clean furniture decorated the den, family photos lined the walls, a few sports trophies collected dust on shelves. The man stared intently at the TV, watching events that had taken place earlier that evening. A computer-generated newscaster on the screen spoke over footage of a gruesome scene.
This was the scene just 3 hours ago as a man claiming to be the legendary Joker disrupted a ceremony at the newly opened Wayne Enterprises building,
the newscaster reported. Sweat broke out on the man's forehead. Not revealing any emotion, he watched the Joker's dramatic entrance, Batman's struggle with Wolf, and the explosions that rocked the terrace. A soft, sweet voice called to the man from another part of the house.
Honey, what are you watching?
The man stared silently at the screen. He didn't reply as the images poured over him.
Adding to the drama was the appearance of another Gotham icon, the Batman, who engaged his one-time foe in a stunning aerial battle.
The newscaster continued.
Honey?
The man's wife called again. The man shook his head, wiped the sweat with his sleeve, then hit the mute button on his TV remote.
It's nothing, sweetheart.
He called back.
Nothing.
The Joker's face filled the screen. Sitting in silence, the man stared at the terrifying image, sweat reappearing on his brow. Gotham City Police Commissioner Barbara Gordon stared at her computer monitor. The Joker's glaring face filled the screen. Commissioner Gordon thought of her younger days when, as Batgirl, she had fought crime in Gotham City side by side with Batman. She had shared Bruce Wayne's secret for all those years. Now, she knew of Terry McGinnis's double life. Barbara shook her head slowly, her mind jumping back and forth between events that had happened long ago and the incident at the Wayne Enterprises complex the night before. A knock came on her office door.
Go away,
she yelled, without taking her eyes off the screen. Terry opened the door and stuck his head into the office.
Morning, Commish.
He beamed, flashing his usually irresistible smile. Without waiting for a reply, he stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. His backpack was slung over one shoulder, his brown jacket unbuttoned as usual. He dropped his backpack to the floor and took a seat across from the commissioner.
You understand English, McGinnis? Scram.
Love to. But first, what can you tell me about clowns?
Terry said. Barbara turned away from the monitor and looked right at Terry.
In this town, they're never funny,
she said, the seriousness in her voice unmistakable. Terry nodded.
Now this Joker.
Drop it, kid.
Barbara cut him off, not making any attempt to hide the sternness in her warning.
That's what the old man's been saying,
Terry said.
Listen to him,
Barbara advised. She let the thought hang in the air.
Hey, look, I know this fruitcake was one of the big bad guys from the Cape and Cowl days.
Terry began.
He was more than that,
Barbara countered. Terry grinned broadly, imitating the man he had confronted the night before.
What? A garden variety wacko who threatened people with whoopee cushions and squirting flowers? Big deal. I'm shaken.
McGinnis!
Barbara shouted, slamming her fist onto the desk. Composing herself, she continued.
The Joker, the real Joker, was unlike anyone you've ever faced, and for your sake, I hope you never do. If Bruce wants you to drop it, then drop it.
Before Terry could utter a response, the phone on Barbara's desk buzzed.
Commissioner, your 9 o'clock is here,
said a voice from the speaker.
Send him in,
Barbara replied, then turned back to Terry.
You were leaving?
Figure I was,
he answered, grabbing his backpack and heading for the door. Terry pulled the door open, and in walked a heavy-set man in his mid-50s. His suit was wrinkled, and his eyes were tired and bloodshot, as if he hadn't slept much the night before. As Terry left the office, he overheard the man say,
Thanks for seeing me, Barb.
The commissioner smiled warmly and gestured to a chair.
That's what I'm here for.
There were times during Bruce Wayne's life when the Batcave felt like a big, lonely place. Often, he sought out the solitude the cave offered, comforted by the quiet emptiness of the huge underground cavern. But tonight, he sat in front of a bat computer with Ace stretched out at his feet. The cave was occupied by more than just the swarm of bats that fluttered among the jagged outcroppings of the ceiling. Tonight, the old place was filled with ghosts. Bruce stared at the computer's enormous monitor. The screen was filled with images of the Joker, mostly from the days when Bruce had battled him as Batman. One picture showed him in full costume, purple coat and gloves, white face, green hair, grinning maniacally. Another showed him in a straitjacket, being monitored by the guards at Arkham Asylum, the hospital for the criminally insane. He had been confined there many times over the years, only to escape or return to criminal ways upon release. One image showed the man who had disrupted the ceremony the night before. Bruce typed commands into the computer. The picture of the Joker in full costume filled the screen. The shot from the night before took up the other half. Beneath each photo ran a straight line. Bruce typed some more, and then the words "Voice ID" appeared on the screen. The Joker's voice boomed from the computer's speakers.
A countdown of victims that will end at midnight, unless our dear Dark Knight stops me first.
The line beneath the old Joker photo moved in a jagged pattern along with his voice. Then a second voice, recorded the night before, rang out.
Hello, Gotham. Joker's back in town.
The line under the second photo moved in the same jagged pattern. Bruce hit another key. The words "voice match identical" popped up beneath the two jagged lines. Identical, Bruce thought. Voice matches don't lie, but it's still impossible. There is no way that man can be the Joker. Ace looked toward the Batcave's entrance. A moment later, Terry stepped up behind Bruce, his backpack slung over his shoulder.
It's funny.
Terry began, looking up at the photos and voice test on the screen.
I know about all your other major enemies, but you never mentioned him. He was the biggest, wasn't he?
It wasn't a popularity contest. He was a psychopath, a monster.
Bruce replied, standing up.
So how is it possible he could still be around after all this time?
It's not possible. He died years ago.
You're sure?
Terry questioned. Bruce walked into a dark corner of the cave.
I was there.
Terry stared into the shadows for a moment, then spoke softly.
You killed him, didn't you?
Bruce turned to face his young protege from the darkness.
He was going to do something so terrible you had no other choice.
Terry tried to guess.
Terry.
Bruce pleaded.
That was it, wasn't it?
Terry asked, confident he had hit upon the truth. Bruce stepped back into the light and walked right up to Terry. In his most serious voice, he said,
I want you to give back the Batman suit.
Terry looked at his mentor, stunned. He hadn't expected this, not in his wildest dreams, and he instinctively clutched his backpack.
What? Why?
There is no reason for you to continue. You've made your father's killers pay for his murder, then put your own needs aside to help the city when it most needed a hero. You've honored the reputation of Batman many times over, and for that, I thank you.
Then why?
Terry asked, still stunned by the request. Bruce walked away from Terry. He looked at the long case displaying the various costumes, then lowered his eyes. He thought of Dick Grayson, the first Robin, and how he took the orphan in and trained him to be Batman's crime-fighting partner. Then he thought of Tim Drake, the second youngster he had trained to be Robin, and how neither of these young lives turned out quite as he had planned.
I had no right to force this life on you or anyone else.
Hey, I was the one who broke in and swiped the suit, remember?
Terry reminded Bruce, following close behind him.
Yes, there was my dad's murder, but we come from two different worlds, Mr. Wayne. I wasn't like you or the kids you took in.
Wearing the suit meant a lot to Terry. He looked away, fighting the embarrassment that washed over him. He had never spoken this honestly about his past to anyone, but he had never had quite so much on the line before. Bruce looked back at him, and Terry took this as a signal to continue.
I was a pretty bad kid once,
Terry admitted.
Ran with a rough crowd, broke a lot of laws to say nothing in my folks' hearts. The kind of punk you wouldn't have wasted a second punch on back in the day.
Bruce was growing impatient with Terry's little journey down memory lane.
Your point?
He asked gruffly.
I'm trying to make up for past sins,
Terry blurted out, holding nothing back now.
The state says my 3 months in juvie wiped me clean, but my soul tells me different.
He thought about how every time he looked Dana's father in the eyes, no matter what he accomplished in school, all he saw was a bad kid. A kid who did time.
Every time I put on that suit, it's my chance to help people who are in trouble. I guess on a personal level, it's a chance to look like a worthwhile human being again. In my eyes, if no one else's.
Terry looked at Bruce, holding his ground more forcefully than he ever had with his mentor. He respected Bruce tremendously, valued his opinion, but there was no doubt about how he felt when it came to being Batman.
It's what I want, Bruce.
Bruce Wayne scowled and turned away.
Stupid kid. You don't know what you want.
Walking away, he added,
None of you ever did.
Terry was stunned. He had just poured his heart out only to be rejected outright. His shock turned to anger, his expression souring. Without speaking, he slipped the backpack off his shoulder and slammed it to the ground. Then he turned and stormed up the stairs, out of the Batcave and away from Wayne Manor. The backpack flopped open, spilling its contents. The black batsuit came to rest on the floor of the Batcave. Ace looked up curiously at Bruce, who was staring down at the batsuit, lost in his own thoughts. Chapter 6. The modest house that Terry shared with his mother and 8-year-old brother Matt was flooded with sunlight the following morning. Terry stumbled down the stairs in his bathrobe and fixed himself a bowl of cold cereal. He flopped into a chair at the kitchen table and was pouring some milk into his bowl when Matt skidded into the room, stopping abruptly. He stared at his big brother, eyes wide, mouth gaping open.
Mom, come quick! Some weirdo broke into our house!
Matt shouted. Terry ignored his brother and continued to shovel spoonfuls of cereal into his mouth.
Maddie, what are you yelling about?
His mom called from upstairs.
There's a stranger sitting at our table!
Matt shouted back.
Ha ha,
Terry said, through a mouthful of cereal. Mary McGinnis came into the kitchen and sat next to her eldest son.
That's your brother,
she said, playing along.
Never seen him before in my life,
Matt replied, pouring some cereal for himself.
It is rare that you're up and around before noon, Terry. What with your job and all.
I'm not working for Mr. Wayne anymore,
Terry explained, staring into his cereal bowl. Mary placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. She realized that he wasn't ready to go into detail now. She had learned to give her son lots of space and leeway since his father's death. Terry appreciated her for it.
Well, it will be nice to have you home for a change. Right, Matt?
Sure, great. Just when I was getting used to being an only child,
Matt replied, sarcastically. Using a spoon as a slingshot, Terry fired a piece of cereal at his brother. It hit Matt right on the nose.
Mom!
Matt whined. Mary shook her head and got up from the table. She sighed. Bruce Wayne stepped from the elevator out onto the terrace of the Wayne Enterprises complex. The place was still a wreck, looking very much as it had after the Joker's attack. As Bruce sun-eyed the damage, Jordan Price supervised the cleanup team.
Clear that garbage away and sweep up that glass,
he ordered, gesturing at the mess all around him.
Yes, sir,
replied a uniformed worker. Price spotted Bruce and walked over to join him.
Well, Bruce, looks like your return party brought out the lunatic fringe in full force.
They weren't on my guest list.
No, of course not. Terrible that our company should be a target for such a thing. Don't know how I'll explain it to the shareholders.
Sorry I missed you at the party.
It was your night. I didn't want to be in the way,
Price explained, heading toward his office. Bruce followed Price, stopping at the door to his office.
Jordan, I know you're not happy with my return.
Price looked right at Bruce.
Please,
he said, holding up his hand.
I'm not paid to have an opinion on the matter. You're head of this corporation. I will strive to do my best for the company as would any other employee.
Then he gave Bruce an odd look.
Something wrong?
Bruce asked. No. I just noticed you're alone today. Usually you have Terry here to assist you.
I'm surprised someone in your position would remember the name of a boy he'd seen maybe once before,
Bruce stated. He was impressed by Price's sharp mind, but suspicious about his reason for recalling Terry's name. Price gestured to his office. Bruce followed him inside. The room was a model of success, achievement, and luxury. A sleek, modern desk lined one whole side of the office. A wall-sized window offered a spectacular view of Gotham. Wooden bookcases lined the remaining walls. Plush couches and chairs were available for visitors, and Bruce settled into a large, overstuffed chair.
I got to my position by being thorough, Bruce,
Price explained as he poured himself a drink.
Besides, I've made it a point to know everything there is to know about the man I work for.
Bruce looked at him, curiously.
Orphaned at age 9, educated abroad, returned to Gotham 15 years later, but for over 2 decades took only a passing interest in day-to-day company operations. Seems you developed somewhat of a playboy reputation. Late hours, nightly carousing, according to rumors.
Price really did his research. He continued about how during that time Bruce charitably served as a legal guardian to 2 orphaned boys. And later he was publicly linked to now Police Commissioner Barbara Gordon, though they never married.
Hardly the stuff of legends.
Bruce shrugged.
Maybe not, but like I said, I am thorough.
Price went on, toasting Bruce with a glass. The phone on Price's desk beeped.
Mr. Price, your lunch appointment is waiting,
Came his secretary's voice.
On my way,
Price replied into the speakerphone. Then turning to Bruce, he asked,
You'll be okay here on your own?
You would know,
Bruce replied, managing a tiny smile.
I would,
Price said, returning the smile. Then he left the office, with Bruce staring suspiciously after him. The last light of the afternoon was fading fast. Rain fell gently from a slate-gray sky as Bruce Wayne's limo negotiated the twists and turns of a narrow country road on the outskirts of Gotham City. Ace, in the passenger seat, cocked his head quizzically and stared at his master, who voiced his thoughts as he drove, as if he was talking to the dog.
I'm standing by my decision,
Bruce stated firmly.
I was a fool to allow McGinnis to assume the role of Batman. It's no life for anyone, and you can quote me.
In the woods just off the road, Terry McGinnis sat astride his motorcycle, patiently waiting. When Bruce's limo passed the spot where he hid, Terry flipped down the visor on his helmet and slowly pulled out onto the lonely road, keeping far enough back to stay out of sight. Bruce turned off onto an unpaved lane and started up a steep, winding hill, carefully navigating the ruts and rocks scattered across the long, neglected road. He soon came to the rusted remains of a large iron gate. Beyond sat the ruins of a building. Bruce coasted to a stop just before the gate. A chill slid up his spine to the base of his skull. The sign Arkham Asylum stood above the open, rusted iron gates. Ace growled slightly at the old structure, sensing Bruce's change of mood, and maybe something else.
Stay,
Bruce commanded Ace as he stepped out of the car. Ace obeyed and stretched out on the seat. The former psychiatric hospital had been home to some of the most violent, dangerously disturbed criminals the world had ever seen. Now the inmates were housed in newer, more modern facilities. But Bruce believed he could find answers in the half-rotted remains of a building full of memories and ghosts. Bruce continued up to the main entrance. He could see that half the building was gone, taken down by work crews who had begun to dismantle the decaying relic. The other half of the asylum looked very much as it had years before, when it was still open. Bruce cautiously pushed open the asylum's main door and stepped inside. Terry's motorcycle rolled past the rusty iron gate and slowed to a stop. Leaving his bike around a bend and out of sight of the limo, Terry pulled off his helmet and started up to the ruin on foot. As he passed the limo, Ace perked up, wagging his tail. Terry gestured for the dog to be quiet.
Yeah, I'm happy to see you too,
he whispered. He needed the dog to stay quiet so the old man wouldn't know he's being followed. Terry carefully stepped through the open entryway, moving slowly, keeping as close to Bruce as possible while remaining unseen. Bruce Wayne strode through the dark building, scanning its many hallways and rooms. He came to a row of long-abandoned jail cells, many of which still had handwritten signs bearing the names of the last occupant. Bruce read Dent H on a cell in which half the padding had been torn off the walls. Two-Face, he thought. Isley, P, was above a cell whose floor was covered in dead leaves, poison ivy. The walls of the last cell he passed were covered in faded, crudely drawn question marks. Nigma, E, the sign read. The Riddler, Bruce thought, shaking his head and shuddering. Too many bad memories. Slowly, he moved past a barrier set up by the demolition crew. It blocked off half of the building that had been mostly removed. Here the structure was open to the outside, and Bruce heard the sound of a nearby stream. He continued down the hall until he came to a large pair of double doors. Painted in flaking gold letters on the glass in the center of each door were the words, Operating Theater. He took a deep breath, then pushed the doors open and stepped inside. It took a few minutes for his eyes to adjust to the dim light. A row of primitive-looking operating tables lined the lowest level of the theater. Above, a row of broken, rusted machines sat in a semicircle. Above that sat row after row of observation seats for those who had to watch the grim proceedings below. Bruce looked up to the ceiling and gasped at what he saw. He caught his breath, grabbed hold of a railing to keep his balance, then turned and fled the room. Terry quickly crouched down in a corner near the operating theater. Bruce bashed through the double doors, sending them flying wide open. Terry stayed low, out of sight, until Bruce had left the building. Then he stepped into the theater and looked up. There, suspended in the dim glow of a broken skylight, hung what looked like a man. Taking a closer look, Terry saw that it was a dummy, hung by the neck, spinning in the partial breeze drifting through the broken windows. Terry climbed to the top of the observation level and got a better view. The crudely formed dummy was made to look like the Joker, complete with his white face, green hair, purple suit, and purple gloves. And painted across the body were the mysterious but chilling words, "I know."